In your first session, you sorted the world you walk and the threats that shape it. The Forgotten Realms set the stage on Toril with Faerun's sun and moon, marking a 24-hour day, and the calendar of Haptos naming the months and long 10 days. It is 1495 DR. Thornwood, once Verdinia, sits under Neverwinter's banner, and Riverton rests along the Mentor River with the Jackrabbit Inn as the adventurer's nexus kept by Marcus Thorpe. The power map came into focus. Lord Amaric Eniston holds the duchy by appointment. Forgus Ruckrag, sent at his behest, conducts a full survey, hiring adventurers and raising bounties after tales of hauntings. Chiron Zeril of Waterdeep, a planar scholar with a warlock's bent, pursues the Portalisman not for prestige, but for its effects. The region honors Tyr's justice, yet rumors insist a cult of Tiamat plots in secret, while Bahamut's servants may rally in response. You dug into the ancient wound. Balthazar forged the Portalisman in the early 600s and courted greater power until he embraced undeath as Mallus the Lich King. The Red Plague served as pretext and plague both, erasing Verdinioa while hiding a coup. Silas Rains, heir of Ravendark and a Crownsguard captain, defended Ilarion in its last night of black lightning and treachery, fell to Mallus, and rose as his first vampire. History called it collapse, truth named it betrayal. You tied the old blood to the new. The historical Zira pulled Silas from a mass grave, and her descendant Zira now carries that inheritance of memory and oath. Rav bears Bahamut's light as a direct foil to Tiamat's shadow. Billy, an animated suit of armor forged in Mallus's war, now roams with a bound soul and the potential to recall what Mallus tried to bury. Fumble Bumbledore claims to be Mallus's son, a lineage that could draw cultists, turn the Portalisman responsive, or fracture trust. Rick O'Connell's death marks the danger of this path. Mortem's haunted resolve, Zira's warden instincts, and the party's disparate ties sharpen the stakes. Finally, you catalog the hooks and tools. The Dagger of Thorns is Mallus's own blade, and a key to summoning him in Dark Castle, a weapon that wounds its wielder for greater harm. The Portalisman remains the prime prize and threat. Between Forgus's commissions, Chiron's pursuit, and the cult's whispers, every road leads from the Jackrabbit Inn toward Thornwood's buried truth, and the choice of what to do when it surfaces. Last session, you stood in the glow of a kingdom that remembered how to hope, and watched that light begin to gutter. The tale opened in Karaskaz, heart of Ravendark, where King Solomon and Queen Amalia, beloved for compassion and courage, finally welcomed the twins they had prayed for, Silas of Endis and Catalan Rose. Peace endured as the children grew bright and curious, until a column of green and gold riders crossed the gates bearing grave news and old friendship. King Azarias of Sunspear arrived with his brother Prince Kaliman, Queen Elena, and their children Elam and Katrina. Amid warm embraces and shared memories, Azarias gifted Silas a spade forged by ancient elven craft that never dulls or breaks, symbol and warning both. Behind closed doors, maps and mead framed a stark confession. The Red Plague was not rumor, but calamity, stripping herds, poisoning rivers, and erasing whole realms. Wallachia and Farsin were already gone. While the kings debated duty and borders, the children made their own vows. Elam would be the archer no enemy ever saw. Katrina would be a paladin at the front. Silas would combine his father's valor with his mother's mercy. Horns cut the day short. An emergency council assembly roiled the town square, and when Solomon forced an audience, the council presented a rider's report. The dwarf village of Shillason lay dead, crops withered, wells turned black, bodies unmarked. A human counselor, Balthazar Siderian, watched the exchange with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Back in the castle, Catalan urged action while Silas swallowed dread. He bled his fear into training, driving his new weapon through wooden dummies until his palms blistered. King Solomon found him and told the truth gently. A plague had come, and they would face it together. Then the tide turned. Rebellions sparked in the outer lands, supplies vanished on the mountain roads, the great ridgeback lakes blackened, crops failed in their furrows. Solomon pleaded for authority to restore order, and, granted a year of emergency powers, was instructed to collaborate with Balthazar. Their uneasy alliance yielded no cure. When Grand Chancellor Sir Aelius, the dragon-born steward of the council, succumbed, a masked procession of plague birds bore him to a pyre in the Dragonstone Mountains. Their faceless arrival chilled the city, and the council's vote that followed chilled it more. By 18-2, Balthazar Siderian rose to Grand Chancellor. The session closed with funeral smoke over the peaks, the lakes gone dark, and a scholar of suspect longevity seated at the heart of power. Friends had come bearing gifts and warnings. You were left with a weapon in a child's hands and a question in every doorway. How do you fight a plague that wears no face?
Last session you stood ankle-deep in ash within the hall ascendant while Ilarion burned and the sky wept red. Balthazar, half-rotted and haloed by a crown of bone, offered Silas a choice: kneel or vanish into oblivion. Silas lifted his head beside the cooling body of the last true king and smiled. "You already killed me," he said, and darkness claimed the scene. You traced the path back a year to the high summer of Vel Thalora, when banners caught the light, and the twin moons, Mir and Dren, rode full. Silas, youngest captain of the Crown's Guard, with a blade forged in dragonfire and an oath beneath the star tree, met the wayfarers as they brought a severed mind flayer's head and a prophecy written in starfire to court. Among you were Zira, storm-eyed and silent as a drawn bow; Thorn, scarred and steady with flask and axe; Kale, whose shadow sometimes moved first; and Mira, whose wild devotion to Miriel burned. Balthazar, the mild scholar who knew too much, parried Silas's blade with effortless sorcery during a celebratory exhibition. The king dismissed misgivings. Then people began to vanish. Castle Miravel glittered with masks and chandeliers until the moon turned blood red and wraiths sifted through walls to drink memory and life. Screams tore the music. A portal yawned in the marble and something wearing a man's skin slithered out. Balthazar was already gone, and on a mirror he had left a message in blood. You had your chance to listen. You followed him into the rift and fell into the pale veil, a prison plane without sunrise where memories calcified and prayer died on the tongue. You fought the weight of what you had been, gods that had forgotten their names, and a world that resented hope. Mira's light faltered. Kyle's shadows bled ahead of him. Zara heard her sister call from a void no one else could find. In the throne room of a forgotten titan, you faced Balthazar again. He did not attack. He spoke, and what he gave Silas were truths that took root. You returned to winter and found Vel Thalora already unraveling. The stars were wrong. Children cast no reflections. Silas did not bleed as he should, nor feel the warmth of fire. When the capital fell, the seed within him bloomed. Balthazar shed his name and rose as Mallus the Lich King, his phylactery hidden across realities, and his will poured into an undead tide. Black lightning split the sky. The sun shattered, the gates drowned in sorrow. In the palace, Silas fought to hold the line and failed. Mallus killed him then, in a mercy twisted to cruelty, raised him as his first vampire. Days later, the wayfarers refused to leave him to the dark. Zira clawed Silas from a grave of bodies. Mira wept. Thorn's axe hovered. Kale said nothing. You chose to try to save what could be saved. With the kingdom fallen and Mallus fled across the veils to unmake the gods, Silas rose with a reborn blade and a shadowed step beside you. The hunt began, and your road vanished into the multiverse's darkest paths. Last session, you gathered at the Jackrabbit Inn under Forgus's watch and accepted 1,000 gold commission to chart the Underdark and bring back anything unnatural. Waylon Selheim's quiet focus, Arrakis's hungry curiosity, Mavis's sardonic edge, Salheen's calm steel, Alice's measured watchfulness, and Silas Raines's haunted restraint set your course for Dim Hollow. On the road, a one-booted highwayman blocked your way and demanded everything. Arrakis let eldritch light crawl his skin, and the brigand's courage broke. The dark castle lay in black ruin, its halls slick with maple root sap that smelled sweet enough to choke. A spark from your lantern ignited the ceiling and collapsed the entry behind you, forcing a panicked push deeper. A young werewolf came howling from the shadows. Mavis's blades flashed. Arrakis's fire hissed across fur. Silas drove steel instead of fangs, and the creature fell. Mavis pried a thorn-wrapped dagger from its cloak, its iron vines faintly pulsing around one warning. Don't. In a vast hall, a gold-leafed statue of Balthazar leered. Silas named him the necromancer who damned his blood. You cast ropes, heaved, and shattered the monument, revealing a hidden lever and a stair, spiraling to a cathedral-sized library. There, a hovering tome shrieked open and vomited spiders. Steel crushed and cut. Arrakis's flames blackened chitin. Lady Lancelot arrived in the chaos, called for the spine, and with a concerted strike, you slammed the book shut. Among scorched husks, you gathered a tarnished iron key and summoner's script Arrakis could copy. Back in town, Chiron the appraiser warned the thorn dagger would bite its bearer. Blink tumbled in with riddles of doors and triangles. Then blue radiance split the inn. The portal swallowed you and dropped you onto cold metal aboard the SS Acosta, stripping you to human forms. Captain Forgus, now a grim man in a pale coat, pushed you into an overrun infirmary. Arrakis read the signs as poison rather than plague. Crystal under nails, lungs seared like smoke. The head scientist, Mallus, was missing. In his apartment, you found vials labeled for death, a note to seed the ventilators, a refrigerator of blood that Silas drank to dull the edge, and a message carved into steel. Mallus Lich King. Sirens wailed. Blue light returned. The world tore and you slammed back into the jackrabbit's lamplight. From the bar's shadow, Rahadi the Mad stepped out, announced that Mallus walks worlds, and flashed the Portalisman, the key to follow. He promised a cost, and vanished. At dawn, you charted threads between realms, resolved to hunt Mallus, and watch the hearth, half expecting the blue to bloom again.
Last session you came to in the Jackrabbit Inn and met a smiling problem named Rahati the Mad. He claimed the Portalisman was his and dangled promises of answers and treasure. The inn dimmed, your knees buckled, and the floor melted as the Portalisman pulsed. The world inverted, and you were thrown through a tearing of light. You struck cold, white metal. The SS Acosta's halls stretched around you, and in this realm you wore human faces, your magic and birthrights shorn away. Captain Forgus, hard-eyed and decidedly un-orcish, marched you to the infirmary. There, a boy seized and died while monitors wailed. Nurses spoke in clipped fear. Victims fell within 24 to 48 hours. Symptoms started like a cold, and the head scientist had vanished when the plague began. You pursued the only thread you had. In Corridor C, a single door stood out. Mallus Lich King. You hit it hard, and the threshold yawned into a portal that slingshotted you through a brief return home and straight back to the ship under Rahati's unseen hand. Dizzied but undeterred, you forced entry into the same apartment, now a torn laboratory and living space. Inside, you scavenged. Arrakis found a fridge humming with a bag of O-blood and shelves littered with vials labeled bismuth, hogweed, diethylene glycol, and arsenic. Albert pieced the chemistry together while Silas sifted a blizzard of notes. One jagged line made the room go still. Deposit in the ventilators. The plague was not an illness. It was a weapon, aerosolized and pushed through the ship's lungs. The curse gave no time for caution. Silas's hunger detonated, and he drained the blood bag to keep the monster at bay. The relief curdled as Albert connected the evidence. The same toxins on the bench were likely in the blood. With the countdown now inside Silas, you set torches, secured the door, and took a guarded rest in the lab. Morning would bring a race against two clocks, finding an antidote and unmasking the traitor who turned the Acasta into a death trap.
This time you step back into Riverton after 5 years, the town still dozing under the shadow of Ravendark. Lord Eniston's net remained cast. Forgus, the orc lieutenant, kept post at the Jackrabbit Inn, recruiting anyone bold or foolish enough to survey the lands. He did not recognize the cloaked patron before him, but Silas Rains did remember Forgus. With little explanation, Silas gathered 2 new allies, Jack, a human warlock, and Aurora, a halfling rogue, claimed the survey bounty and left for the Dim Hollow. The march through the forest was taut as wire. At the caves Silas had once explored, you made camp and set a watch. In the deep night, a bat slashed for Aurora's head and failed, vanishing into the dark. At shift change, Jack's restraint snapped. He searched his companions' packs and uncovered damning secrets about Silas. He pocketed the knowledge for later. Dawn brought cold resolve and the Underdark, slick stone, clutching tunnels, and a slow ascent into the gray day beyond, where Ravendark Castle loomed like a wound. Jack called up a spectral sparrow to scout the grounds. What it revealed unsettled you all. Angles that shouldn't be, walls that seemed to lean, and a pervading wrongness that felt like old blood and older oaths. The more you probed with cautious magic and measured steps, the more certain it became. The place was steeped in dark power, with a hand of Tiamat somewhere in the mortar. You slipped into an armory whose silence rasped like a held breath. Then the breath burst. Jack accused Silas of secret-keeping and warned Aurora that her association poisoned trust. He named Silas's hidden vampirism as a doom waiting to happen. The castle woke to your discord. Malice stirred and took hold, phasing Ravendark in and out of the material plane. Iron racks screamed, stones quaked, and the armory threatened to swallow you. You escaped by moments and agreed, at least, on retreat. The road back to Riverton held nothing but strained quiet. At the Jackrabbit, you reported what you could to Forgus, sidestepped the argument, took your earnings, and parted ways. leaving Mallus's shadow and Tiamat's echo to deepen behind you. The winds of adventure beckon, and you arrived in a riverton that had softened with 5 years of peace. The Jackrabbit Inn welcomed 3 strangers with a shared appetite for purpose: Rick O'Connell, the enterprising scholar; Zira, the warden of the wild; and Mortem, the profane soul. Marcus poured the ale, Officer Forgus provided the lead. Ravendark Castle still festered with a haunting, and Chiron, appearing as if from nowhere, handed over a dagger of thorns with instructions to seat it in a throne room pedestal. Your first steps through Ravendark were deceptively calm until the library stirred to life. Shelves burst open and tomes strafed you like hurled stones. In a scramble through stacks and shadows, you found a way to still the enchantment. Rick, ever the opportunist, slipped away with a couple of tomes for later study. The respite ended in the armored hall. Suits of plate descended from their stands and silently chose each of you as prey. Rick broke line of sight with a calculated mislead, sending his follower clanking in the wrong direction. Mortem led his pursuer into the heart of the chamber. The collision shattered the great glass dais, and the animated armor plunged into the dungeons below. Zira assessed her own stalker, judged no immediate malice, and let it trail her, going so far as to name the rattling guardian Billy. You pressed on to the throne room and searched until the pedestal revealed itself within the headrest. When the dagger slid home, skeletal fingers crept over the chair, and Mallus rose, a chill gathering around his presence. He delivered an ultimatum. 2 might leave, but 1 must remain. Fixing on Rick and the stolen books, he leveled an accusation of theft. Rick answered with steady words, an unflinching confidence. The tension broke when Mallus accepted the return of the tomes and allowed all 3 of you to depart. You left Ravendark alive and with a task half finished, the dagger in place. Mallus awakened and aware, setting the stage for your inevitable return. Last session, you circled the campfire beyond the looming Ravendark Castle, catching your breath after escaping Mallus. The debate was immediate and sharp. Rick pushed to strike back while the trail was warm. Mortem warned that stepping inside again was courting death, and Zara measured caution against opportunity. Rick sought answers in his books and found a chilling constant: liches must feed on souls. That truth only sharpened the riddle. Why had Mallus let you go? You questioned Billy, the animated armor who had marched beside you. His answer was as simple as it was disquieting. He was built to guard the castle, not the king. Rick then conjured the amulet of Portalis, securing a way to tear free from the castle if needed. With that safety valve, you chose to re-enter and probe the heart of Mallus's domain. Your path took you through the graveyard, where a wrought iron gate barred the main mausoleum. Brute force failed, but Rick's deft improvisation opened the lock. Inside a tomb engraved dark, 3 sarcophagi awaited: a king, a queen, and a young princess. Mortem recalled the history of Ravendark. The ruling Rains family numbered 4. The missing prince turned a family record into a mystery demanding answers. In the servants' quarters, events snapped out of your control. Billy's frame flared with a storm blue glow. Rick shouted for you to run. Mortem and Zira hesitated as the light surged, and in a flash the armor vanished, marked only by a scorched circle. Rick concluded Billy had been forcibly teleported, not destroyed, likely by Mallus's hand. You smashed through the main doors and returned to the library, only to find it immaculate, as if your former struggle had never happened. Amid rows of restored shelves, Rick drew a genealogy that confirmed Mortem's recollection and named a formidable court mage, Balthazar. Mortem uncovered a red leather volume, The Necromancy of Thai, which Rick quickly pocketed, and then a prize beyond measure, Mallus's diary. It revealed that Mallus had once been an elf who achieved lichdom through forbidden rites and a pact with the dragon god Tiamat. With that revelation and the castle's uncanny reset in mind, you went back to the armor hall. The mosaic dais you had broken was whole again. Rick vaulted onto it, shattered the stone a second time, and plunged into the hidden space below as the moment cut to black, leaving the rest of you on the brink of following.
Last session, you stormed the heart of Ravendark and faced Mallus the Lich King. Spells cracked the pillars, steel rang against bone, and Mallus showed no fatigue as the fight dragged toward despair. Then Rick seized the only opening left. He grappled the Lich to the floor and bellowed for you to finish it. Zira answered with a sweeping fire that devoured the throne room. When the flames receded, Mallus's form unraveled into drifting cinders, and Rick lay still among them. In the ruined hush, you gathered Rick's remains. Below you discovered Billy, an animated suit of armor spared by a rune-laced cape, and led him out of the depths. You returned to Riverton, handed Forgus your report, and accepted your due while Marcus drew pints, and Chiron circled with a merchant's eye. The quiet did not last. The Portalisman on your table thrummed like a heartbeat, the tavern sagged and flowed, and you were swallowed by a metal-white pocket between worlds. The Acasta safe room, a planar antechamber that hums, shelters, and seals itself for 12 long hours. Sleep came hard, and opened into Arvandor. In a forest of living light, Corellon's avatar greeted you with both condolence and command. Mallus, he said, would return. A lich's body is only a mask. Its soul lives on in phylacteries. If you would end the tyrant, you must hunt his anchors across the plains. The god placed portal stones in your hands, each resonant with a trail to one of Mallus's soul shards. Your route unfurled like a war map. Avernus for a devil's bargain. Neverwinter for shadowed intelligence. Celestia for a soul puzzle under Bahamut's gaze. The Feywild to carve through Naktur's goblin court. And Tytherion to move unseen in Tiamat's own dark. Corellon warned he could not walk openly with you. Doing so would rouse the Dragon Queen, and then he worked a final grace. The Portalisman was mended, and Rohati the Mad was freed from whatever binding held him, his altered laughter threaded with promises. You woke where you'd fallen in the humming calm of the Acasta safe room, burdened by loss, armed with stones and purpose, and pointed towards the long road to end Mallus forever.
As the party slumbers, you shared a single dream. Emerald glades, silver leaves, a white stag bidding you right the scales, then woke to find Arvandor, not a vision, but a realm beneath your feet. Amrin Kelreath, envoy of Corellon, led you into a vale where oaks knit a living throne. Corellon spoke plainly. Mallus's red plague seeped through the plains, and the Lich's soul lay split into 7 shards. You had felled only a copy before. He summoned his fallen servant Rohati, pulled a black shard free and unmade it, then armed you with portal stones and overflowing packs. His final charge to Amrin was simple and weighty: bring you back alive. You chose Celestia. In a vast coliseum near Quartzes, you witnessed Bahamut render judgment as a condemned figure was swallowed by a portal to Avernus. Rav knelt first and the rest followed. Heat and pins and needles' radiance climbed your bodies as the platinum dragon weighed your hearts and pronounced you worthy. A shard welled up from the arena floor. You carried it to the stands and shattered it, and Bahamut's favor settled upon Rav like tempered steel. Avernus opened next under sulphur skies. Within Raphael's opulent house of pleasure, the archdemon greeted you with a smile sharpened to a point. He would part with the shard, for a price later claimed. Mortem signed, hellbound by his own hand, and the crystal passed to you. A single ringing strike split it to dust. Then the Feywild, familiar yet too bright, all edges shimmering with magic. Amren's map of Mana and Zira's hawk eyes brought you to Noctur, where the Goblin King strutted beneath a shard-crowned headdress. Amren's velveted charm smoothed your way through the city. Tasha's peals of laughter toppled the door guards, and a portal spun open. Mortem crossed the room in a burst, grappled the king, and dragged him through to the material plane, collapsing at the long, ruined gates of Ravendark Castle. In the scuffle, Mortem slit the king's throat and nicked Zira with the same blade. Amren pried the crystal from the dead headdress. Zira grounded under her boot. With 4 fragments destroyed, Rohadi's, Celestia's, Avernus's, and Nocturne's, 3 remain. You made camp outside Ravendark Castle, the Underdark yawning beyond, planning your next move with Mortem's infernal debt looming, and the hunt for Mallus only sharpening. Last session, you departed Noctur alongside the Goblin Chief and emerged through the portal at the blackened threshold of Ravendark Castle. The portal's stone drew you with a relentless certainty, signaling a shard close at hand. Within the cracked foyer, your search tightened to the floor itself. Rav, seized by resolve, summoned a spectral hammer and hammered the tiles until stone fractured and dust choked the air. The blow split open the floor and exposed the black shard. In the same breath, his next strike shattered both tile and prize, the shard crushed to fragments. In the aftermath, the oppressive fog you had endured burned away. Post-shard clarity fell over you like cold rain. You turned to Neverwinter next, stepping through another portal into its sprawling streets and thrum of voices. Amren, Zira, and Billy split off for the Wild Tit Tavern to meet Amren's contact, Working Tavern Rumor and Reach, while Mortem and Rav swept bakeries for breakfast and goodwill. By midday, you reconvened with a confirmed rendezvous and a sack of pastries to pass around. Small comforts before the descent. You entered the sewers, where stench and stagnant water soaked through boots and patients alike. Following the current upstream, you reached a broad cistern chamber, girded by wet stone and echoing drip. Shapes stirred along the margins. Red Arrow gang members slid into place, lines thickening across the exits, until you were ringed in by sheer numbers. Amren stepped forward and announced your intent to see their leader. Laughter skittered along the walls, then synchronized into a single word, Dimitri. First a whisper, then a taunt, then a roar. A Goliath nearly 8 feet tall strode out to meet you, towering over all but Rav. The gang closed ranks into a circle, forcing a choice. Dimitri leveled a challenge to the party. Rav answered without flinching. Armor, blades, and shields clattered to the wet stone as both acknowledged an ancient right. Bare knuckle, no quarter, until only one stood. Then the crash, Dragonborn and Goliath colliding in a brutal exchange, fists and feet thudding against muscle and bone, the gang howling with each strike. You could only watch, forbidden to interfere, as the duel ground on, balance shifting, blood mixing with sewer water, until the session ended mid-fight, the circle unbroken and the decision still to come. In Chapter 11, you began in a circle of Red Arrow gangsters as Rav and Dimitri beat each other raw. Rav dropped the enforcer with a final, crushing strike, and immediately steadied his breath with a brief blessing. The red arrows parted, and you were ushered into the den of arrows, oil-stained stone, a humming iron chest by a throne, and Valistra, charismatic and cold, measuring you over a drained goblet. She named her price for the shard. 2 jobs, no questions. She also snapped her fingers for a half-elf to unlock a cage, releasing Milo into your care with a curt order to take him with you. You divided your strength. Rav, Zira, and Billy headed to the abandoned Black Lake Opera House, sensing latent magic as Zira's mouse familiar slipped through cracked doors. Inside the foyer was a tableau of blood and deliberately polished silver coins, faintly warded. Phantom applause and whispering swelled as Rav moved down a mirror-lined hall. Glass cracked as he passed. On stage, a wiry figure in a hammered silver coin mask emerged. Sareth Corin, the coin ripper. He claimed the shard's infernal whispers were damning couriers, and that he saved them by feeding them silver. Rav tried to strike a pact, stop the killings, and the shard would be destroyed. Sareth demanded the slayings continue. Steel answered. The stage became a battlefield. Zira's bolt hit home. Burning hands whooshed and licked at curtains. A balcony gave way and crashed near Zira, bruising her badly. Surrounded by whirling spirits and backed by a summoned hammer, Rav pressed the Ripper hard, shrugged off a slashing curse, and finally overwhelmed him with a surge of withering power. Silence followed. Rav removed the mask, set 2 coins over the dead man's eyes, wrapped the body in a curtain, and carried the weight back through Neverwinter. Meanwhile, Mortem, Amren, and Milo shouldered a cold iron-banded crate toward an abandoned lighthouse. Gentarim raiders struck from the beach. Milo's halberd felled one immediately. Mortem's dagger dropped another. Amren's cutting word staggered a third. The cliffside climb was treacherous. Stone gave way and you bled for every step. Twice the crate whispered to Mortem, "Free me," but you kept moving. At the lighthouse, a tall, iron-masked buyer from Luskan calling himself Karas collected the crate with disdain and a warning, and you walked away alive. Back in the den of arrows, Valistra kept her bargain. She opened the humming chest and surrendered the shard. Rav set it down and brought a carpenter's hammer down in a clean, decisive blow. The shard shattered into glittering dust. "One left," Amren said. "You traded the stink of the sewers for the wind of the highlands." Rav detoured to bury the Ripper, and the campfire found you all, quiet, bruised, and facing the last leg of the hunt. As the curtain begins to close, you took your first breath of quiet in what felt like a lifetime. Neverwinter dimmed behind you, your camp set among wildflowers and broken stones, while Amren raised a humming sanctuary of silver-blue light. In that hush, the night brought reckonings. Rav's watch cracked open with the presence of Bahamut, all like thunder in the bones. The Platinum Dragon offered Rav a warrior's choice, a final mercy, a single, radiant cataclysm that could end the enemy and the wielder both. Rav accepted the boon with a vow to win without it if he could. Bahamut then turned to Billy. The armor glowed green, voice and memory returned, and a soul stood where a wraith had lingered. Milo's watch brought the quiet blessing of rain and a memory from the sea, a captain's rough wisdom that left his resolve steadied. Under moonlight, Coralon appeared within Amren's temple, inviting Amren home to the eternal forest, and placing a perfect spark of mending in Zira's hands, one true return from death, and restoring the Portalisman that would take you to Mallus. In the last watch, Raphael stepped from the shadows to Mortem, promising freedom for a price. Deliver Mallus's skull, and the debt would be forgiven. Dawn found you planning the last push. At Zira's word, the Portalisman thrummed. You spoke Mallus's name and dropped into a bone and marble arena floating in the astral sea. Thousands of pale souls filled the stands. Mallus awaited at center, crowned in guttering green, the final shard hanging at his throat. The fight came on fast. Milo's halberd bit bone. Zira's fire erased a lumbering bone golem. Rav's radiant onslaught encircling spirits punished every step. The shard on Mallus's breastplate exploded under guiding light, and his power flared to a new, cruel pitch. He turned the floor to fire, wrapped the arena in terror and illusions that felt like the end of the world, and then he leveled a killing word at Rav. Billy stepped between. He took the spell full in the chest, light pouring from the seams of his armor. He remembered a sunset, thanked you for giving him another, and fell. Grief became fury. You broke Mallus's defenses in a blaze of steel and heaven-bright strikes until his body unraveled to a skull. That was when Raphael emerged from brimstone and rosewood. He came to collect on Mortem's contract. Arguments cut no ice. The pact was the pact. In the struggle and the shouting, the terms bound tight and Mortem was taken, his soul claimed. In the quiet that followed, Zira opened her palm and spent Coralon's spark on the dead you could still save. Ash swirled, and Rick burst back into the world naked, gasping, very alive. You gathered him up, gripped the Portalisman, and stepped out of the astral dusk into Miss Tuffet's warm, bewildered tea shop. Outside, the sky burned the same gold Billy remembered, and with Mallus ended, Mortem lost to a devil, and the Portalisman to secure. You stood ready to decide whether your road bends toward a temple vault or into the hells.